Hello and welcome to episode 1. Today I will be looking at the motorcycles I've owned in the past and some of the stories around them. How and why I became a motorcycle rider and some of the misconceptions of what a motorcyclist is. So why don't you get comfy and see if I have owned any motorcycle you have in the past. Before we start, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any updates. We all start somewhere and this is my motorcycle history. I had fun on railway tracks with an old Lambretta and a Honda 50 Cub that were not roadworthy by any means, but they were not mine, and most of the time we honestly spent trying to bump start them, but it was my first experience with a bike with an engine. It was a great time, lots of fun, if not the safest looking back at it now. From a young age I loved cycling. I'm so glad my dad taught me to ride. I had been looking for a motorcycle for a while because at the age of 16 you could ride a motorcycle in the UK back then with no test of any sort, just L plates and under a 125cc. I'd looked through every paper I could find that listed motorcycles for sale. I didn't have a lot of money, so a new one was not an option, although you always dreamed you could own a brand new motorcycle. Finally I found a motorcycle for sale I could afford from the insurance payout from my bicycle theft, but it wasn't found in the motorcycle column of the local paper but under the car section, and it was local. It was being sold by a man who'd bought a new replacement motorcycle. So the first bike on this list is a 1978 silver Honda CB100N at a wholesome cost of £175 with MOT and tax. This is the bike I learned to ride on. Nothing special, everything worked as I expected. I didn't know any better at the time. I couldn't even start it when I first went to look at it. No electric start, kick start only, and I didn't even have any basic gear to ride it home. The gentleman was happy enough to show me how to get to start it and gave me hints on using the choke and how to run the engine. He also delivered it for me and my parents dropped him back home. The important part of this motorcycle, I suppose, are the specs. A top speed of around 50 to 60 mile an hour, 10 brake horsepower, seat height extremely low, width narrow and no storage. No internet to get specs back then when I bought this bike, or to know if it was good or not. But I passed both my Part 1 and Part 2 on this little bike. Part 1 is now the CBT in the UK, Part 2 is your unrestricted A licence, so before I could drive a car I could have ridden a 1400cc motorcycle. Changes to motorcycle licensing have prevented this from now being possible. So the bike served its purpose before it died, engine blown going up a hill, when I found neutral by mistake, but it was a great bike for town, going to work, or a few faster B roads. So the second bike on this list is yet another Honda, a 250 Super Dream. Now I understand this isn't everybody's dream motorcycle. It was a low mileage Honda 250 Super Dream. I cannot remember the year, but it came with matching colour front fairing and top box and panniers. Bought from a car garage, it cost me as much to insure as it did to buy the bike, and that was only third party fire and theft. Top speed of about 85 mile an hour downhill, wind assisted. It was quicker than the small CC bikes my friends had at the time, and it was a solid workhorse. A good solid commuter, and here's the important specs again. A top speed of around 80 mile an hour, 27 brake horsepower, seat height 755mm, width reasonably narrow, storage 30 litres due to the additional storage. This was better for commuting and carrying a pillion and would easily keep up with traffic on dual carriageways. Not very fast on acceleration, but a solid reliable motorcycle, but still with my limited knowledge this was better than the little CB100N. It unfortunately didn't last too long due to a couple of crashes, neither being my fault, and being written off by the insurance company, who didn't even want it back, so I got to get rid of this myself. This was my last bike for many years. I had other responsibilities, but there came a time when I looked for a second means of transportation, and I spotted a lovely looking 125cc. This is an Aprilia Classic. Looks are in the eyes of the beholder, and buying the Aprilia Classic 125 taught me a few lessons. One, paying for something once a month for a full 3 years could be painful. Looks don't always mean it's a good motorcycle, So here are the specs that matter. A top speed of around 55 mile an hour, 11 brake horsepower limited, seat height 831mm, width 780mm and approximately 0.5 litres of storage. To be honest, this was a disappointing ride. It couldn't pass lorries on a dual carriageway once you caught up to them, and the wind resistance was too high to pass, and I didn't like riding two-stroke engines with no engine braking. Plus, regardless of how nice it looked, I just did not enjoy riding it. The way it handled wasn't for me. My first cruiser experience was not a good one. I even asked a more experienced rider to take it for a spin and they just said it handled right for the way a cruiser should do. Taking it for a service and having a courtesy bike for the first time, I was handed the keys to my first taste of a real big engine motorcycle. Taking out a 600cc that did twice the top speed of the Aprilia and got to the top speed of the 125 in a few seconds, and turned in and cornered and stopped so much better, which made it just feel even worse riding the Aprilia Classic home, and I sold it to a local garage not long after. I had paid it off with very few miles on the clock. So the fourth bike on my list was another Honda. I went back to a brand that I knew and trusted and had found reliable in the past. So I picked up a Honda VT250F, kind of a rare bike in the UK, but I didn't know that at the time. It was very cheap for a Honda 250. Not a Super Dream, but a Honda VT250F, hoping this would be better than the 125 with double the engine capacity, but this bike had issues. The specifications: top speed of around 70 mile an hour, 35 brake horsepower, seat height of 780mm and a width of 750mm. Storage 0 litres. This motorcycle had a strange brake setup. Inboard brake disc, anyone? Never felt like it would stop, and not that it was fast either. Top speed about 70 mile an hour, internet says, and it should have done 100. The motorcycle was old. It did a job. It got me from A to B and was cheap and cheerful, and was sold on when the money was tight to a dealer who bought it for not much money. But it hadn't cost much in the first place. Quite surprised I didn't lose a lot of money on this one. This is the difference between cars and motorcycles. Depreciation seems to be much less with motorcycles than with cars. I stopped riding for around 10 years. Finally bought a motorcycle to start commuting with again, when work removed our car parking spaces. I didn't want to drive past work, to get a bus to come back to my office, and then, when at the end of the day, get a bus back to the car park, to pick my car up, to drive back past the office, to get home. It just seemed like a giant waste of my time. Plus the fact, there's a motorcycle bay that nobody ever used. But it was there. So I checked, and yes, I could use it. What to buy would be financed. Not everyone is in a position to buy a brand new bike. My history of bikes taught me that I wouldn't be happy with a 125cc for very long, let alone the 3 years it was going to take me to pay for it. So what did I find? Bike number 5. So I bought a brand new Suzuki Inazuma, a newly launched model, and I got the dealer to throw in a helmet, jacket and gloves. Sometimes it's worth asking for a deal. That wasn't advertised anywhere in the store. A lovely brand new bike to do 6 miles a day on a Monday to Friday, and the scariest thing was getting a brand new bike not having ridden in 10 years. Maybe it's true you never forget how to ride a bike? Let me know if you think this statement is true or not. Should I have gone and done a refresher course? Maybe. Here are the important bits, the specs. Top speed of around 85 miles an hour, 24 brake horsepower, seat height 780mm, width 760mm, storage 30 litres due to additional storage. A great little commuter, fun to take down the country roads. Would do 70 mile an hour easy enough, but we were almost out of legs. While pushing it and revving it hard, you could eventually get a higher top speed. I didn't need a bike capable of 70 mile an hour plus, did I? Such a nimble light bike with neutral manners. And my first owned Suzuki. But it wouldn't be my last Suzuki. Great for short town runs, B roads and occasional dual carriageway. Perfect to do a quick commute, lots of fun to go out on at the weekend. Then the office move, that came somewhat unexpectedly, made the Inazuma a little hard work. It now had to do most of the journey at 70 mile an hour, and wasn't really keeping up with the traffic on a busy dual carriageway. This was making me feel a little uncomfortable. It didn't give you a choice to get out of trouble. You had to brake, you couldn't accelerate away, and I personally felt like a sitting duck. Was this a lack of experience? Maybe. So after a few months, it was time to look for a replacement. Several weeks passed looking at various models and brands of motorcycle, dragging various people around looking at every model in every showroom. Sorry, that's what you get shopping with a Libra. I found a Suzuki SV650 with little miles and a fair few modifications, including upturned handlebars, which made it more comfortable to me than the standard bars, in a stunning white and blue stripes. So this was my 6th motorcycle. Here are the important specs again. A top speed of around 126 miles an hour, 73 brake horsepower, seat height 800mm, width 730mm, storage 0.2 litres. So the SV650 became my next bike, and this is the bike that bang for the buck is awesome. It's great in a straight line, corners well and stops well. It's design that's been around a long time, and riding it you can see why this V-twin is much loved. It was comfortable enough riding position to be on it for 2 hours, and it was only the second motorcycle I had ridden to the seaside on, covering more than 100 miles in a day. Never have I felt the need to be part of a motorcycle gang or group to ride out. It's nice to have a pillion on the bike with someone you care about and spend time together, but my bikes are bought to use as commuting tools, not lifestyle choices. The SV650 became my company vehicle after I changed jobs. The 3k service intervals when you need a dealer stamp becomes expensive quickly when you're doing 1,000 miles or so a month, and for that reason it was part exchange for another new model bike. A bike I saw the press release for and knew I wanted at least a test ride when it was launched. This is the bike my head and heart agreed on. All day comfort to ride, loads of available power in a lovely shade of red. When pricing the SV650 for part exchange, it had over 20,000 miles on the clock. It was over triple what the guide said it should have for its age, but it was still in lovely condition, if a little mucky. So I had the Tracer 700. It was the ex-demo, so not brand new, but not far off. Here's the spec. The top speed of around 130 miles an hour, 74 brake horsepower, seat height 835mm, width 806mm, and a 0.2 litre storage. It was serviced at the correct intervals and never missed anything it needed, and was traded in with an ABS fault for my current ride after 30,000 miles, clocking up in excess of 10,000 miles a year in all weathers, up and down dual carriageway and motorways. It was great on all roads, and a high position gave good visibility. The engine, well, this provides fun, explosive amounts of power and made overtaking easy. It did cause me some issues getting on and off it due to my age more than anything else. So that's my past motorcycle history. Have you owned any bikes on this list? Leave a comment below and ask any questions about them. So what did I replace it with? Can you guess? Click like and subscribe to get notifications about the next video. Find out what I'm riding now and why. Or click the link in the top corner. Thank you for watching.